Okay, again, thank you everyone for coming, and I'm excited to introduce Constance Koo. I've known her for a long time, and one of the things I know best about her is she's a great orchestra harpist and performer, and I'd love to have her introduce herself and tell you a little bit about her background before jumping into the content today.
Hey everyone, thank you, Kristal, for having me. It's so cool to be able to see some of your students and to get to hear them too. What a treat. And everyone did such a great job, even if you are doing something or did something that was a work in progress. That's always really nice to hear as well, because then you can hear what it was like then. And then when you do have it ready, it's like, wow, it sounds so great. Like this is just a step in that direction towards what it's going to be. So it's great to hear that too. And so nice to hear your names and introduce yourselves. That's wonderful. I prepared a little presentation. Can I share my screen? Yes, okay. Oh, it says host disabled. Okay, one second. I'll just keep talking while you figure that out until you
Yeah, tell me a
have it
little bit
ready.
about your background.
Yeah, okay. So one of the slides on the presentation is just about just some introduction. So I started playing the harp when I was, I think, in middle school. I can't really remember, but I actually played the piano starting at 7 years old. And when I got to middle school, I really wanted to learn a new instrument that was very rare and unusual. So I never even saw a harpist perform live before, but I wanted to play the harp. So I decided to do that. And let me just oh yes, I can share my screen now. Let me just, oops, let me stop share for 1 second. Here we are. Okay, I'm going to, so let me just back up. I'll get to finishing my introduction in a second, but today I'm just going to be talking about orchestral performing and when you're a harpist in an orchestra. So here we are. Today we're going to go over, there's so much to go over. So forgive me if you feel like I'm just like dumping loads of information into your brains, but feel free to save your questions or even jump in and ask a question or raise your hand if you have a question right away, and I'd be happy to answer. But we'll go over our introductions. I have some practical tips and tools for playing an orchestra. Then we're going to talk a little bit about the brief history of the harp in orchestra, because that's very important too to know, because it kind of puts you as the harpist into a context. And then also acquiring the skills to play an orchestra. Then I'll kind of give you a brief overview of some standard orchestral repertoire that you can aspire to learn or work on in your practice, show you some examples with the way how some harp parts are notated or marked, or, you know, with fingering or changing completely. And then also some ways that you can get involved in performing in orchestra or ensemble. And lastly, maybe touch upon auditions and then question and answer. So again, I started off and then jumped into harp in middle school. And I didn't really know, honestly, what I wanted to do after I graduated from high school. How many of you are any of you in high school? Maybe one or two. I think I heard like 16. I think 13 might be ninth grade, right? But okay, a couple in high school. So everyone, you know, you're going to have to find out what you might want to do in the future, and I'm not sure where all of you are at, but I really didn't plan on pursuing harp full time, but I knew I wanted to keep playing harp. And I ended up going to UC Davis. I was a biology major just because, who knows why, but I wanted to keep playing harp. And every college should have a music department, and they had a harp teacher and a orchestra, and the harpist at the time, she like broke her leg, so she couldn't play harp because of the pedals. And that was my basically a very abrupt entry into orchestral harp playing. And it was, you know, everyone's story is different. You could join a beginner's youth orchestra as your first exposure, or you could jump into a university orchestra to play, or a community or whatever. So everyone has a different story, but this is just how I got into it. And one thing led to the next, one opportunity opened, the next opened, and lo and behold, then I found myself really wanting to pursue music full time. And so I decided to just take some time off to prepare for conservatory auditions. And I ended up doing some graduate programs at the Cleveland Institute of Music, where I studied Yolanda analysis. But Kristal and I both, actually, maybe you didn't. Did you ever study with Doug in San Francisco Symphony? Okay, you did. Okay, so Kristal and I both studied with Doug. He was our teacher. We both had him as our instructor. So anyway, that's a little bit about me. Now, post all the schooling, I now freelance in orchestral performance, or I guess I would say part of what I do is orchestral performance. And during my conservatory training and after, and even now, I am very heavily involved in orchestral performance. I took a number of orchestra auditions for a lot of professional orchestras around the States. But at this time, I'm not really pursuing that so much. So it is, and we can talk more about the orchestral auditioning process later, but it is a huge time commitment. And, you know, just, you want to weigh your priorities and see, you know, what exactly you want to end up doing before you make the decision to go into all that stuff. So your teacher, Kristal, mentioned very briefly a little bit about all of you and your ensemble playing experience. Can we just go through really quickly, one at a time, and share what, if any, orchestral playing you do? And I'm just going to look at my screen and call out people that are in this order. So first on my screen, I see Zahara.
I've been in a harp ensemble for, I think, one and a half years, forget. And I'm in youth orchestra currently.
Okay, awesome. How long did you play in youth orchestra for?
It's just been 1 year right now.
Oh, I see. Okay, great.
Are you still in your school orchestra also?
Yeah, I'm in school orchestra.
Oh, wow. So you actually play in 3 ensembles.
Just one ensemble, and then my youth orchestra is my school orchestra.
Oh, youth orchestra is your school orchestra. Cool. Becca.
I play in my high school orchestra.
Wow, that's great. Okay, Haley.
I play in Miss Kristal's harp ensemble.
Cool. How about you, Bella?
Actually, I'm not that sure because I don't really play ensemble a lot. Like,
Okay, that's fine.
I don't really play with other people because I don't think I'm like that old enough or something.
I think you're maybe thinking about joining ensemble this year or next year.
Great. Okay, and how about you, Michelle?
I did Miss Kristal's harp ensemble for 1 year, and currently I'm in my school's orchestra.
Oh, awesome. And I have a quick question, Michelle. Do you have a microphone set up?
Oh yeah, it's right over there.
Okay, and that's for your like Zoom playing and things like that.
Yeah.
That's great. I want to know it sounds really good. So the microphone
Thank
is
you.
really excellent. And Lottie, do you play in any ensembles? or with other people? Do you play harp with other instruments?
Oh, I think you're on
Oh,
mute, Lottie. You could also type it in.
oops.
That's okay. Not to answer for Lottie. I think you're just beginning. Maybe you'll do ensemble this year or next year.
Great. Oh, I think she's still muted. Okay, maybe you can type in the chat. Thank you for everyone for sharing a little bit about your ensemble. It's really nice to hear that some of you are doing orchestra in school. It's not, I mean, if you have orchestra in school, that's really great to hear. So anyway, yeah, I want to touch upon the history of the harp in orchestra, just because you see an orchestra, you see the string section, the winds, the brass, the percussion, and you just assume that they have been, and you see the harpist, you assume that they've been playing, this is the usual. But, back, and I'm sure some of you already know this, the harp as we know it today with the pedals going in sharp and flat positions did not exist before the 1800s. So what do you think the harp did in orchestra in like 1650, for example? Nothing. There was no harp. So, with the violins and the string section and you have the brass and all that stuff, they have been, and like within Baroque music, then you go to the classical era, there was not really any harp available, and there was no harp in orchestra. So then when the double action pedal harp was invented, composers were very excited about incorporating the harp into their orchestral works. So we're looking at the in classical music as the Romantic era. And if any of you have studied classical music history or even theory, the Romantic era is past Mozart, past Beethoven, and now you're getting lots of chromaticism seen in music, a lot of unusual meter changes. So not just a very standard common time, not just the 4/4, but you'll get things like 4/4, then change to, 5/4, 5/8, and then 7/8, and then 3/4, and then back to 4/4. Just things are getting a little more a little more complex. Let's just put it that way. And then also, I want to also say that the harp, even now, I would say the harp is still seen as a very solo instrument. You're a solo instrument playing by yourself, but then even within the orchestra as an ensemble, it's still quite a solo instrument because yes, there are some pieces that require two harps, but those two harp parts aren't going to be exactly the same. They're two very independent parts. So you're still playing your part as a solo harpist. And even if there's just one harp, you're the only harpist in your section. You're a section of one. So you're still quite a solo instrument within the greater context of a large ensemble. So all that to be said, what does that mean for you? You've basically jumped into an orchestral, or you've jumped into a compositionally complex world in orchestra playing. You haven't been playing in a musical style gradually evolving into the next compositional style, into the next, and adapting to that. You kind of are just being thrown in, starting when the pedal harp began. And then also, I'm really happy to hear that a lot of you are doing harp ensemble first. or starting a youth orchestra, because a lot of youth orchestras today don't have harp, or the more beginner ensembles don't have harp, so that when you finally do go into harp, you're kind of being thrown into an ensemble that is quite a bit more accustomed to playing an ensemble than you might be. So it's really nice to hear that a lot of you, though, are actually starting with harp ensemble or youth orchestra, where other students are in the same level of playing as you. So when you in orchestra, I'm going to just give you a lot of little tips that are practical for your success. Now, when you rehearse, okay, so you have an orchestra and then there's a performance, but of course, before performance, you have rehearsal. And rehearsal, yes, is practicing playing, but it's not practicing your part playing. It is practicing playing with everybody. So for you as the harpist, you are going to do your own individual private practicing before the rehearsal. And I'm going to just say, to be successful, prepare your part to comfort level. And by comfort level, I mean, unless you're comfortable feeling very awkward and being called out upon among 80 of your colleagues, is preparing your part where you just know it so well. You may not need to have it memorized that kind of well, but you do want to have, first of all, get your part early. Don't let the orchestra manager or the orchestra librarian send you a part the day before your rehearsal. If you have a teacher or someone telling you this is a rehearsal date and this is the date of the concert, make sure you immediately ask for the part and tell them and demand. This is the only time I will nicely demand that they send you the part right now. So if you say right now, then maybe you'll get it later in the afternoon or tomorrow or by the weekend, but as early as possible, because there's lots of things you need to do to your harp part in your music. It's one thing, you don't be ashamed to write out the music to help you know exactly where the beats lie. Then also take the harp part, look up online if you can for the actual score, where you see every instrument's part laid out before you, and read the score as you listen to a recording of that piece. And don't worry about marking or anything. This would just be to give you an understanding of what the whole piece sounds like in its entirety. And as you're listening, now you can take your pencil and mark what's going on while the harp is playing. So if you're reading the score and suddenly you see the harp come in, is the harp being accompanied by the string section, for example? Or is the harp playing kind of an accompaniment to the lute who is playing a melody? So you want to know exactly what is happening around in the orchestra while you're supposed to be playing. And then also, sometimes the parts, sometimes certain pieces, like say you're asked to play Nutcracker, for example, there are several different editions of Nutcracker, which one edition will have rehearsal numbers and the other edition might have rehearsal letters. So you want to make sure, and this doesn't always happen. Usually the librarian or the orchestra manager is pretty good about this, but sometimes it'll happen. Just make sure that the orchestra conductor has the same edition as the orchestra harp part that you're getting. And if not, sometimes you have to look in the score and mark out all the rehearsal letters If you have rehearsal numbers, you might need to put in all the rehearsal letters. And you might have to write in all the measure numbers at the beginning of every line because your part may not have rehearsal numbers. This might sound quite obvious or quite like, I don't need to do that, but trust me, sometimes this will save you so much embarrassment and hassle when you have the part marked so well that when you get to rehearsal, it's going to help you so much as far as knowing what's happening. Speaking of markings, the other thing is also the fingering. Now this is specifically to your harp part. Once you've listened to the music, you've read it along with the score, you can zone in on what you need to play. So most orchestra parts, especially the really common standard pieces, will already have markings in them. You feel free to use those markings, but oftentimes you will want, actually all the time, go through all the fingerings, all the pedal markings, all the charts, the pedal charts, and just make sure that you have your fingerings written in, that you've got the pedal markings written in, and that the pedal charts are written in every time you have an entrance or every time at the rehearsal letter or number of your entrance. And this will really help you feel secure. And also, if, you know, in rehearsal, a conductor will jump around sections quite often. And so if you were you get to rehearsal D and they go, oh, let's skip to rehearsal Y. Then you don't want, how are you supposed to know what your pedals are at rehearsal Y unless you have a chart written right there at your entrance? Then you can slam those pedals into position and be ready to play at rehearsal Y. And then the other thing is, back to the bigger picture, your understanding of the bigger picture, research the musical style or the era of the piece and the history of the piece, because this will really inform how you should be playing the music and also give you an idea of the context and you know, what is common during this time of compositional history. So yeah, I would, you know, when you prepare your part, when you receive the part, I would say there's two elements to consider. One is the bigger picture element, where you understand to listen to the recording in its entirety, even multiple recordings, because certain orchestras interpret the same piece in a different way. And then also the historical context of the piece. That's the big picture understanding. Then you want the very immediate understanding of the harp part itself. And you want to make sure that it's marked so thoroughly that you're very comfortable bringing that part to your rehearsal and feeling that you can jump to any section and be able to play it. And know, it's basically, you've got a map. The harp part is your map to playing this piece with many other people. Another practical tip for playing is a matter of this whole concept for tuning. So as you guys know, you cannot tune all 47 of your strings along with the orchestra when the oboe plays their concert A. So please arrive early and early enough to get set up and to start tuning. I like to arrive early just because I tune better when I don't hear everyone warming up on stage. It gives me a chance to hear more clearly. Another thing you can do is check in with the oboist because, and again, most orchestras I would imagine play at 440 hertz, but you know, the tuning you can do 440, 441, 442, which is very sharp, or you can go 439 or 38, which is very flat. So just check. And maybe for most of you, it's not as big of a deal, but if you are to play with community orchestras or outside of your youth orchestra or in a festival orchestra, just check in with the oboist and see what they are tuning to. and you can tune your harp to 440. If you're using I'm assuming you would use like an electric tuner, and you would set it to 440. One small little nuance is also if you are very experienced, or you play a lot in orchestra and you know the characteristics of your hall that you play in, if it gets very, very hot, for example, because of the lights and the audience and just with all the people on stage, and if it gets very, very hot, you might want to tune up a little bit. So because as you know, the hotter it is in a room, the more flat your tuning is going to be, because the wood of the harp will relax and the tuning will go flat in a very warm setting. So if you've tuned perfectly to 440 in an empty hall, and then suddenly all the lights go on and all the people, hundreds of people fill in, and suddenly it's like so warm in it, you might be pretty flat by that time. So if the oboist tunes the orchestra to 440, and you know the room is going to get really hot, tune to 441, and that'll help also carry over your sound as well. And it's so minuscule of a difference that it won't be out of tune with the orchestra. Equipment, you want a tuning key, your tuners, your electric tuners, or if you use a tuning app, I use a tuning app, and also a microphone. You can connect your electric tuner to a little microphone that you can insert into the body of your harp, or even some of them are like suction cups that you can stick onto the soundboard of your harp to help pick up the sound and cancel out the sound of other instrumentalists warming up and things like that. So, and I'm sorry if some of this sounds like common knowledge to you, but I just want to make sure, I don't want to assume that you know this. So the other thing is, you always want to bring with you, have a little bag, or like a harp bag for your orchestra, and make sure always make sure you've got your tuning key. But we're human. Sometimes you might forget it. I admit I've left my tuning key at home before at a rehearsal, but it's not a good feeling. Bring your tuning key, have an extra set of strings with you. Strings will definitely break. They have broken on me in orchestra rehearsals, orchestra concerts, and auditions. So always have a set of strings with you by your side, along with a little clipper for the string end. Glissando picks to save your poor fingers if you are asked to play tons of glissandi with a triple F dynamic. Pencil and eraser to take notes during rehearsal, and also earplugs in case the entire brass section is playing right behind your head. And also, don't feel afraid to get up from your harp bench during rehearsal and during a break in the rehearsal to ask questions. Go to the conductor if you need clarification on his or her beat pattern. If in rehearsal they're conducting something and you missed the cue, or you messed up and it was because of some communication error between you and the conductor, or just you don't know what, and you think maybe the conductor can help you, go ask him or her for clarification, because sometimes that's really, really helpful. And also it makes them aware that you're playing here and that you actually might need some additional eye contact or a bigger cue or something help. Or but not all conductors are, they can mess up too, actually. So if you mess up, and don't always take it upon yourself, like, oh, why did I do it this way? Or why am I not playing right? Sometimes it is another person's fault. So it helps to just communicate that, like, I'm having a hard time playing this, or I'm not clear on what you're doing here. Can you please help me? And I'm sure they would be happy to, because ultimately their goal is the success of everyone in the orchestra, because the success of everyone in the orchestra yields a great performance. And then lastly, you want to also just make sure, if you're going to a new location, where do you unload your harp? Don't go to a place where the entrance has like a grand staircase, right? So ask the orchestra manager, where do I load my harp? Where can I park? Also double check the dates. You don't want to, like, if row typo and you think that the concert's on a Saturday and yet it was on Friday night, that's a bad feeling too. So just, you know, it never hurts to be overly prepared, especially when it comes to performing. Any questions so far? And if you do have a question, or I'm sorry, Kristal, you.
Oh, I was saying good job so far. Like you're really
Oh, okay, thanks.
Yeah. And then
And let me know if it's just too much of like a info dump on everyone's minds. Okay. All right, let's go on.
Zahara's hand and I see Michelle's hand.
Oh, okay, sorry. Let me move this bar here of
and you guys can have the raise hand button too. You guys can find that.
Oh, Michelle, I see your actual hand.
Okay, so my question is about, so you mentioned that before the 1800s, pedal harps without that couldn't have all of the sharps and flats didn't exist yet. So I wanted to ask what even after this, were lever harps just very, very uncommon in orchestras and just not used?
Yes, I would just say yes. I think part of the reason is because it was so limited as far as what's the word when you go from one key to my theory mind, when you're modulating from one key to another, it was not very easy to do quickly either on a lever harp. So I think it never got picked up basically for orchestral writing. And other hands, was there one?
Yeah, Zahara.
Zahara.
I'm not sure if I should know the answer to this question, but for tuning, why should we specifically check in with the oboist and not another
Okay. Because you know the oboist gives they play an A for the whole orchestra to tune to, right? Or at least they should to tune. They'll be like, and then everyone's like tuning their string instruments, or like they'll do it for the brass and for the woodwinds. So what I was saying is sometimes they'll use like their electric tuner and they'll be looking, some of them do this, but a lot of them don't also, but they look and they're going to see if their A is in tune with their little machine. And you can change that A to a higher pitched A or a lower pitched A. And it's known as like a standard A pitch can be is known as 440 Hertz. It's just like a measurement of the vibration. Without getting too technical, it's the measurement of sound vibrations. So we call it 440, and it might sound like this. Boop. But then 441 is a little sharper, but everyone could interpret that as their A, and it could be like boop. So everyone will use that as the A. So that's why I'm saying, though, for the harpist, you tune separately from that oboist, but you want to know if the oboist is tuning the whole orchestra to either the 440 or the 441. You might not need this might not be so much something to be on level, but if you are to play later with other orchestras, that might be something for you to talk to the oboist and just say, what are you tuning to? 440, 441, and then they'll tell you, oh, I tuned to 440, and then you can make sure your tuner is set to 440, and then you're going to tune all of your harp strings to that. Great question.
Usually there's a violinist that does this, right, instead of the oboist.
Oh, does a violinist tune the orchestra?
I see that in like string orchestras or sometimes smaller orchestras. I've seen the first violinist do that.
That's actually a great point. So whoever is tuning, whether it's the first violinist or the oboist, sometimes it's good to check in just to make sure that you're matching on the same page. Great questions. All right, let's go on. Okay, so as you are all in your ensemble forming lives with the harp, I am going to basically cap the skills into 2 words: professionalism and preparation. And that is what is going to help you be successful in rehearsal. Because all of this, I think it's important to be, for one thing, of course, to be prepared so that you can really get the most out of your rehearsals. And that yields also a certain level of professionalism. You're showing that you respect everyone's time and you are going to contribute to the overall success of the group and the artistic beauty of the piece, and also lend your own independent musical voice as a piece in the entire work. And that is what's going to color and characterize the performance. It's not anyone's own piece, but it's a accumulation of everyone's musical voices. So one important skill to have in this is listening skills. So again, I'm just going to repeat myself because these are very important things to do. It's important to listen to various recordings of the same piece. And that is, like I mentioned before, is because you want to be aware of what has been done before and not just assuming that it's always played a certain way. And that allows you to be flexible when you enter into rehearsal for the first time. You can be ready for anything. There is pitch super fast or moderate and relaxed. The other thing in listening is to listen to the piece while reading the score. I already talked a bit about that. Marking your part before and during rehearsals. So you've marked all the fingerings, all the pedals, and all the charts, and even the cues, a little marking of like, pay attention here, exclamation point, or like little glasses to look. This means to look at the conductor. But while you're playing during rehearsal, you may have left out something like, you may have listened to the section next to you and you're like, oh, the flute actually plays this rhythm. Maybe they play eighth notes to your quarter notes. So you can just jot in like some eighth notes over your quarter notes to show you, as I'm playing, I should be listening to eighth notes as I'm playing my quarter notes. Another thing that would be really good for you to practice is sight reading. It's not very common, I feel, for harpists to be asked to sight read, just because most informed people know that harpists need to put in their pedals, their fingering. They can't just sight read any blank piece of notes, but it is really helpful to be practicing sight reading maybe on a regular basis, because when you're in orchestra, there's so much going on around you that your mind needs to be paying attention to, like who's playing, watching the conductor, what he's or she's doing, listening to all the sections around you. Are you playing with them, and what's the dynamic and the phrasing and all that? It will free your mind if you can sight read, and it'll free your mind from just trying to focus on the page. It will free your mind to thinking about the musical interpretation, what's happening around you. Maybe you can think for a second about your feet, so it's good to be able to identify patterns quickly. And also in orchestra, sometimes, they might throw in a overture and say, here, harp, we're going to add this to the program because the soloist got sick and now we need to play this instead. So being able to sight read parts can be very, very helpful. Ultimately, sight reading, and also I wrote in parentheses improv, ultimately it's there to help you be flexible with just being able to take on unpredictability. And oftentimes rehearsals can be quite unpredictable and can be very fast paced. So you got to be ready to adapt, steer, and change the tracks in your mind right away. We already kind of talked about this understanding stuff. But one thing I will say is also, even in your practice room by yourself, practice playing your harp part and looking up and down, up and down, up and down, pretending like you're looking at the conductor, because it is, the conductor is keeping all these musicians together, right? And also the conductor may want more of harp or less harp, which is very rare. Usually they want more harp, but you want to be able to make eye contact many times with the conductor. But how can you make eye contact with the conductor if you're so concerned about where your fingers are or what your music is? So of course, with everything that you do with harp, practice looking up, even just looking up a pretend thing on the wall. Maybe puts like a mark on the wall or something. Look up, look down, look up, look down, that type of thing. The other thing is you can even, I didn't write this out, but you can even turn on a recording of the piece and play your harp with the recording and see if you can hear for the parts that you're listening for. So just get used to isolating the different sensory or senses that you have, like isolate your eyes, be able to play harp, but then focus on what you're looking at, or play your part and also hear, listen for the string section, or listen for the accompanying oboist or the percussion. And with orchestra, your skills as a solo harpist is going to help you as an orchestral harpist. You still want to play with that full rich tone. You to be able to phrase pieces effectively. You need to have excellent rhythm, especially in orchestra, because if your rhythm is off, you're going to be off with how many people are in an orchestra? 60, 80, sometimes even 100 people. So how can 100 people play together harmoniously and unified? They all have the same rhythm. So having those rhythmic skills is super important in ensemble playing. And then lastly, just as with solo playing, you want to have excellent pedal facility, because as you know, missing a pedal, if you're playing the right strings and you miss a pedal, it's going to be the wrong note, and that can be very flustering. So those same skills for solo performance are going to be equally as important in orchestral performance. And definitely, all of this is going to help you develop decisive playing, confidence, again, strong rhythm, and then professionalism in the kind of character that you will have as a harpist. And these are all things that I think everyone in orchestra will appreciate in you, because it will just help them play their part that much better as well. And again, this for practicing, it's the same principles of practicing that you would do in your solo playing, you can apply also in your orchestral practice. Basically, it all boils down to one thing. Well, actually two things: knowing your goals and also organizing your time efficiently so that you are accomplishing those goals. Those two things are the successful preparation in your harp playing. Okay, let's go on to some, because there's lots of it, some standard orchestral repertoire. And this word audition is in parentheses because it's so standard that every orchestra, professional orchestra, I should say, wants to hear you play them. And they want to make sure you can play them if you are going to play in their orchestra. And don't let this list intimidate you. It's actually quite, some of these excerpts or pieces or the harp parts are quite advanced. So it's something for you to aspire to, or even to just start with maybe one or these excerpts. So are any of you familiar with this list, or have any of you played anything from this list before? I see some heads nodding. Haley, what do you recognize?
The Young Person's Guide to Orchestra and Swan Lake. I don't remember what I played, but I've seen most of these names before.
Oh, okay, great. When I was thinking up about this list, the Young Person's Guide to the Orchestra is actually quite a common piece, even in youth orchestra, because it highlights every orchestra section individually. It gives them a chance to shine. So it's a great piece for youth orchestra. Anyone else recognize or find any of these familiar?
I played in Capriccio Español.
Oh, awesome. That's such a, and you played the cadenza?
They gave me the piano part.
Oh no, the piano part. Okay, well, that's cool that you were able to still participate in this piece, because you actually now have an understanding of the whole piece performed by everybody. Awesome. So again, this piece, this list has a lot of advanced excerpts, but again, it's just something for you to be aware of, because if you are going to continue on in your orchestral playing as a harpist, you will eventually be given the part to this. And it would just feel really nice if you got, for example, like Zigan, and you were like, never this before, but you got that part and you're like, oh, I've never performed this before, but I have actually started practicing it. So anyway, I can share this list with your teacher, and she can share it out, or if you're interested in holding on to it, I can share all this with you later. Okay, and so as some of you are already actually experienced in playing harp parts, as you know, and I mentioned, put in the fingering, put in the pedal charts, put in the pedals. Sometimes harp parts, as good as the composer is, sometimes they aren't super familiar with writing for harp. I would say you don't have to worry so much with like people like Debussy and Ravel and they do a good job, but especially like newer composers, they might not know how to write for the harp as well. So you are going to have to rewrite some of the, or renotate some of the parts. And also even some of the older stuff, you will have to renotate. And the four listed here are some of our excerpts from the list that you just saw, but they're little, I'll show you the markings for this. And I'm going to stop sharing and reshare another screen. Let me see. How do I do this? Oh, it's my PDFs here. Okay. Here we are. Okay. Wait. Page. Sorry for the bad, like the photocopy, like this black stuff here, but this is the fifth movement of Bartók's Concerto for Orchestra, the very last thing that Harp 1 plays. And actually, I believe Harp 2 plays the exact same thing. But as you can see, there are two, there's the bass, the treble clef and the bass clef. But look, here, we're not going to play these notes. And also there are enharmonics. There's a B sharp, but instead of B sharp there, I'm sorry, this is circled, but it's still played as B sharp. But basically what I wanted to show you is just what kind of markings you would put in here and how even the left hand and the crossed out. So just because you see notes in a harp part doesn't mean that you have to play all of them. And I would say a lot of those standard harp parts that I showed you from that list, it's going to be kind of like common knowledge that no harpist ever plays these notes. And so you'll just know that because it'll probably already be crossed out, or your teacher will tell you that no one ever plays these notes, even though it's written. And don't feel bad for not playing them, because ultimately, sometimes canceling out notes actually brings the harp out even more. And you're able to play all the other notes that much more clearly. So it's actually sometimes even better to cross out some notes. And the other thing is, sometimes the notes on two staffs can be handled by one hand. And you see this, these like little loop things over every beat, because that's done by the left hand. It's not divided totally by right hand. So that's just one example. The other example, and this is overly marked, but what I wanted to show you here is that don't be afraid to write out the rhythm. This is Bartók's Concerto for Orchestra, the fourth movement, where the harpists play these beautiful, lush chords accompanying the viola melody. And the rhythms change every measure. It goes from 3/4 to 5/8, 3/4, 5/8, 7/8, 3/4. And so you really need to be counting nonstop during this passage. You should not be playing without counting. So that's why there's the number in here. Guess who wrote them? So she writes her beats in. And then it also makes it easier for you to just see, what the beats are. But I would say, I don't know why she wrote in two pedal, like the pedals in the staff and the pedals below the staff. That's another story. Okay, this excerpt here, and I'm just showing this to you because this is an example of where you would rewrite the notes. And actually in this box here, it's all enharmonics that you're playing. So there are times when you will need to play, this is by Strauss, this is his Salome, and there's a really big, crazy, heavy with all these harp chords also jumping around. And it's very chromatic. So Strauss is in that time period of classical music where there's lots of chromaticism. And if you're doing like a theoretical analysis of the music, it makes sense. But for the harpist and our pedals, it makes sense to play things in a different way. And this, I will just tell you, is done with flats rather than sharps, and it's totally rewritten. So, I think probably you may have heard this if you are an orchestral harpist, that the harp actually sounds, the quality of tone is a little bit better in flat rather than in sharp. And the reason is because in flat, you have like that open string where nothing is pinching on the string itself. It's able to resonate fully. In sharp, you've got two discs pressing on your strings, so that doesn't allow for as resonance of a tone. And so when you've got nothing but sharps in every note, it might be better go and mix and do all flats, and then you'll have like a fuller, more resonant sound. So that's why that was rewritten. Here, this is Verdi's La Forza del Destino Overture. The harp part has a very important triplet figure that runs throughout the whole this whole section, and the accompaniment is the clarinet. The clarinet plays the melody while the harp plays the accompaniment. And it's fingered many, I mean, there's, of course, you can play something, you can, play something in many different ways with different kinds of fingering. But in this case, you're playing the right hand, the treble clef with your right hand, and the left hand comes in the treble clef right here. And instead of playing a B natural, you're going to play a C flat. So this actually be marked or rewritten, I guess, to play the enharmonics here. And you don't have to necessarily remember this right now, but it's just to give you some examples of how things are rewritten to help the harpist play the part successfully, not for any other reason. So here in this this line here, the second to last line, the first note of every triplet in the treble clef is played basically in interval in the left hand, just to make it easier for your right hand. So again, it's, I think after playing and marking parts for months and years, you'll get an idea. There is sort of a methodology or a logic behind orchestral harp notation and writing and things like that. All right. Oh, and also, has Netter's Waltz of the Flowers harp cadenza? I'm sure some of the older students, you've all seen it. Well, let me just show you. You guys have, the older students have seen it, but maybe some of the younger students haven't seen it. But this is a very classic example of a harp work for the harpist. Look, right hand is playing descending arpeggios on the beat. Left hand is playing ascending arpeggios on the beat. Can you imagine how hard that is? And this is a cadenza. So everyone knows, and I'm sure those of you who own this part, you already know this secret. Well, it's not really a secret, but you already know that you don't play this as written. You're going to play the right hand on this. You're going to play these notes followed by basically this note, but also playing these backwards in like a descending pattern. So the whole thing, the whole beat is going to be right hand followed by left hand, all descending, one beat after the other. Sorry that I actually couldn't find my cadenza, so I couldn't show you my actual part with the markings. All that much, I think. Okay, so that's pretty much what I would say in a nutshell what I have for you. Let me go back to my presentation here. That's pretty much what I have for you. I figured that your teacher, Kristal, she has a lot of, she's a great resource for orchestral performing opportunities, but youth orchestras, a lot of you are already a part of. There are festivals that you can travel to or work like camps, harp camps that would have ensemble playing, but also youth orchestra camps. Community orchestras are happy, I'm sure, to have a harpist in your neighborhood or county or local community orchestra. Then in your school, and then when any of you get to college, I would highly, if you're interested, highly recommend checking out that university orchestra. And say, in my case, UC Davis, they had harpists or students who were playing harp, but then, like I said, one of them broke her leg, and so she couldn't play. So then that was sort of like my open door into the world of harp playing. So, sometimes it might actually be more advantageous to you to find a place that didn't have a harpist. And that will maybe guarantee that you will be that harpist for that place. That's just one strategy, I guess you could consider. And then also not just orchestra, but chamber ensembles, playing in a duo or trio. It's all the same type of skills that you would employ, but you wouldn't be playing symphonic works, obviously, but it's still going to be helpful to building those skills that you would use in orchestra. And I put auditions here, but that might be a completely separate work itself because there's a lot to auditions, but I'm happy to also kind of give some tips or answer questions about that if you have them. So does anyone have any questions or like any further thoughts or feedback on anything that was presented today or with anything that you're dealing with in orchestra? Or if you're curious about auditions.
Yeah, you could talk, share maybe one or two things about audition, unless you guys have any questions. Have you guys had an audition yet? Oh, you have one. Becca, you did audition? Okay.
How did that go for you? Or
It
what was
went-
it?
It
Good.
went like kind of bad, but
Oh, bad.
I'm the
Oh,
only harp, so it wasn't like I would get like
oh, I see.
first.
I guess, I think the thing of what I would say about auditions is it is a very different performing environment and circumstance than what you're actually auditioning for. So you actually need to prepare for an audition in a different way than you would need to prepare for an orchestral concert, for example. And a huge part of the preparation is not going to be in your playing. It's going to be all up here. It's going to be your mental, what sports psychologists actually call your mental toughness and your mental preparation. So you're going to need it. And why is that? It's because people get nervous. They get distracted when they're nervous. They clam up, their hands shake, their heart beats fast, they get sweaty, and then suddenly they forget everything. So that isn't reflective of how you play at all. You actually know how to play. You practice for hours. You played it memorized. You played it for your mom and for your teacher in a lesson, and everything sounded great. So why can't you play it? It's not because you can't play well that you failed an audition. It might be just because your mental toughness isn't quite there yet. So just briefly, some keys to getting more mentally prepared is to make it common, put yourself in nerve-wracking situations, play for other harpists, and you've got lots of harp colleagues you can play for, which is awesome. Play for conductors, people who are like your youth conductor or your music teacher at school or another, I don't know, another like a conducting student or a panel. Like try to ask someone, like put together a little panel of actual musicians and just simulate an experience where it's like people are like listening to critique how you play. And then just, the more you do that, the more you become comfortable with those types of situations. And the other thing also to do is to, as you're doing those kinds of situations where you're performing for these people, these panels, the conductor, you're just going from one excerpt to the next. What you're doing is you want to find strategies that will quiet the thoughts in your mind about, what do they think about me? Oh no, I started on with a wrong pedal, or I can't even think of the first piece, or like, why is the light shining so brightly in my left eye when it wasn't before? And suddenly I can't see my bass wire strings. Those types of thoughts you need to be able to control. And so that's another thing about mental toughness, is being able to quiet those thoughts in your mind, that all you're thinking about is the music that you're going to play, and also what you want to play, how you want to play that music. How do you want to start that first note? And exactly how is that going to feel when my finger is like closing into my hand? Just really specific things like that, that you wouldn't otherwise be able to focus on when your mind is racing and thinking about all these external things that you just can't control. They're just beyond your control. So that's, I would say, audition preparation is probably like 60% mental preparation and 40% practicing, because chances are the stuff on an audition list after taking numerous auditions, it's going to start looking exactly the same. They're going to want to hear the Nutcracker cadenza. They want to hear Berlioz Symphony Fantastique, you know, Britain's Young Person's Guide to the Orchestra, the harp cadenza. It's going to be on repeat, and you're going to be practicing these things. Like, I've probably played the Nutcracker cadenza just practicing alone, maybe like hundreds of thousands of times. So it's not because you can't play it. Sometimes if you found yourself in a bad orchestra, if you found yourself having a bad audition, maybe it's not so much that you weren't prepared to play technically and musically, but it could just be that your mental preparation wasn't quite there. So, I mean, this is, yeah. And, you know, actually Olympics, I love watching the Olympics because you can just see them mentally preparing. You can see them closing their eyes and like taking some breaths and like just gathering their thoughts and quieting their minds before they go out to compete for that gold medal. And I think I actually knew a Olympic figure skater. He was coach for an Olympic skater, and they do lots of mental training too. So it's kind of like you know, you can even read books about this. It's not, they won't be so much on musicians and performing musically, but there's a lot of psychology, sports psychology books that you can read that apply exactly to the same type of under pressure performing situations. I would recommend doing that too if you're really interested in digging deep on getting mentally prepared. So yeah, that's it for the most part. Thank you all for listening and being here. It's great to meet some of you, and best of luck to all of your ensemble playing lives in the future, present and future.
Well, thank you, Constance. That was great. I think it was very helpful, and everything that you said, I know is either applying now or will apply. So it was very good to hear that.
Great, that's awesome. Thank you.
Okay, well, guys, I will see some of you guys tomorrow. Who's showing up to do a string change and learn how to take care of your harps? Because the program changed because Esther's family has COVID. So,
oh no.
Yeah, so she was going to teach tomorrow, but now Sam is. So anybody coming to the class tomorrow? Okay, great. So if you come in person, you get to change my harp strings. And if you stay home and do Zoom, you get to change your own harp strings. So be ready for that. Okay, well, thank you, Constance. We'll see you around.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Bye. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Bye.